Hey guys, MrPokke here, back with another video, and welcome to another CN unit analysis, this time featuring Changli from Wuthering Waves. What exactly is her DPS role? Is she a main DPS, sub DPS, or is this a brand new archetype that we have never seen before? Who is her best teammates and as well as the best rotations in order to get your Changli to deal the highest amount of damage possible, right? So without further ado, let's get into today's content.
Subscribe!
Alright, so first things first, let's just go through Changli's character kit. She is not to say a very complex character. You essentially want to get 4 stacks of enflamement. Once you get 4 stacks, you press and hold your heavy attack to let go of this very big burst damage, which you can only obtain after getting 4 stacks of enflamement. So the name of the game for Changli is how quickly can you stack on these 4 stacks of enflamement, as well as the fact as when should you rotate her out during the skill downtimes. Because an issue with Changli is her attack animations, they are considered pretty slow, and if you were to only rely on Changli to gain enflamement from her attack combination, then it's gonna take a pretty long time, which doesn't really classify her as a main DPS, but I digress, right? Her basic attack is gonna be up to 4 consecutive attacks. She does have 2 different chain of animations, of one being on the ground and one being mid-air, right? And then for a heavy attack, you want to use it at 4 stacks of enflamement in order to deal the highest amount of burst damage possible. Thing to know about Changli's basic attack is that when you're at the ground, her basic combinations technically has a higher multiplier, but there's a longer drag. So it's gonna take a little bit longer to finish up the final 3rd and 4th hit. Whereas if you're up in the air, your multiplier is lesser, but it is quicker. And as we know by now, Changli's damage output is majority gonna be coming from the burst damage instead of her basic attack damage. So when you are getting stacks of enflamement, it is recommended to use the mid-air combinations instead of using the on-the-ground combinations, right? So that is going to do for the basic attack. For her resonance skill, 3-partite flames. After using resonance skill, dashes towards the enemy and enters true sight lasting 12 seconds. True sight, it is not only obtained from our resonance skill, she gains true sight from both the 3rd hit, which is right before the heavy attack where she gains enflamement, as well as the ultimate, as well as her intro skill. So as long as you gain this true sight, she will gain this mini damage buff, and the next attack after true sight will be the one giving you enflamement. Right, so for resonance skill, TLDR, you have 2 judges. To kind of simplify this a little bit, you want to only use your skills to generate stacks for you. Kind of reminiscent of you guys play Zen Zone 0 Ellen, you will only use Ellen's skill to trigger her 3rd and 4th base attack combinations, because that is where the highest multiplier is. For Changli, it is the exact same thing. You want to use Changli's skill sort of as like a little charge to get her into the 3rd and 4th base attack animation in order to stack on enflamement, right? So that is the key purpose of using Changli's resonance skill. Like I mentioned, when you're in basic in the ground and basic in the air, the air damage is technically slightly lower, but it does have a faster drag, right? So it is better for you to gain your enflamement just a little bit faster, right? So that is going to be that for the resonance skill. Then finally, for her resonance liberation, is going to be Radiance of Fealty. Obtain 4 stacks of enflamement instantly and enters into Fury Feather, which is basically increasing your attack by 25% after Fury Feather ends, right? So this is basically a very quick way for you to gain 4 stacks of enflamement as soon as humanly possible. You want to use this either at the very start where you have no stacks, or at the very end when you just finish using your heavy attack after using 4 stacks of enflamement. So very straightforward ultimate. Use it when you basically have 0 stacks on enflamement to get the ultimate best bang for buck, right? So that's gonna be that for active skills. Then jumping into the passive skill is gonna be pretty much her bread and butter, the 40 circuit, the enflamement stuff, which is the flaming sacrifice. As long as you carry 4 stacks of enflamement, you consume all enflamement to cast flaming sacrifice. So it is considered as resonance skill damage, and this resonance skill damage, it will be a pretty big portion of where Changli's damage is going to be coming from. Aside from this, it's going to be from her resonance liberation, right? Also, when you're casting flaming sacrifice, you do get a 40% damage reduction of Changli herself, so it makes her a little bit tankier and prevents her from getting one shot, especially when you consider that the animation to cast this is a little bit long, right? So that is going to be that. For her inherent skills, which is 2 traits as you can see. First trace, when you release the basic attack of True Sight on the air, on True Sight on the ground, each stack of enflamement increases fusion damage by 5% up to 20%. So it is not too bad. And when you are releasing heavy attack or liberation damage, Changli's fusion damage bonus is increased by 20% and ignores 15% of the target's defense. So this is one of the first few units that we can actually have a innate built-in defense ignore into a kit itself. So that is very, very nice, right? So I would say that the second trace arguably has a higher bonus, especially since you have 20% fusion damage as well as the 15% defense reduction. But the first stuff is also pretty good, right? So both of them you're gonna unlock, so no, nothing too much to be said over there. And finally, for her intro skills and outro skills. For intro skills, you always want to try to activate this because it instantly allows you to enter into enflamement right after your first attack, right? So it will allow you to gain this one stack very, very quickly, which means that the unit before Changli wants to cast an outro skill before you enter into Changli, right? So very important to keep this rotation a little bit faster. And then for the outro skill is amplifying our incoming resonator fusion damage by 20% as well as the resonance liberation damage, which is the ultimate damage by 25% for 10 seconds. Keep in mind this buff, it only lasts for 10 seconds or until switched out. So if you were to switch out Changli, then you are no longer going to enjoy this buff, right? So that is her overall character kit. Alright, so now with her basic kit explained, this is going to be her key combos that you will be likely using, especially when it comes to tower adversity. Alright, so this is going to be the overall rotations for Changli. You can take a kind of pause here to break down exactly how it's going to be. It may look complicated at first, but when you put into practice, it's very, very quick and you can kind of get the gist of it very, very fast. So first of all, you activate your Echo, which is going to be the Infernal Rider. Q, done. Set it up just to get the buffs, all that. Very, very nice. During the time when you cast into your Infernal Rider, you can then swap into your teammates to kind of cast their buffs, as Ultra whatever, to charge up their Concerto energy. Then once you're done, you have the Concerto energy to cast your intro skill. First step, once you enter intro skill, first of enflamement, done, drop down, and then you cast Changli's skill herself, and she's gonna fly up and do another basic attack downwards, and that's gonna be your second stack. And then afterwards, you want a basic attack twice, which is 2 mouse 1, right? 2 left click, and then do a dash upwards, right? Do a jump and then use the aerial attack to drop down and get your next stack. Because like I mentioned, your aerial attack's hit drag is faster than compared to your ground attack. So afterwards, then you do your skill again to gain the next stack. And finally, that is gonna be the final set you have at this point. 4 sets of enflamement, 1 from the intro skill, 1 from the skill, then 1 from a normal basic attack animation, another 1 from the skill because the skill has 2 different stacks. So at this point, you will now cast your 4 sets of enflamement. Once you have cast this 4 sets of enflamement, then you swap back into your next DPS, ideally either Encore, Shixia, something of the second DPS, because there is a hit drag you can swap back around, right? So once you swap back around, you swap back into Changli, cast your ultimate, big burst of damage, and then you cast your enflaments 4 stacks again, and that is gonna be the overall rotations. So TLDR, intro, skill, base attack chain, skill, that is where you will get your 4 sets of influence. As much as possible, try to use the aerial combinations for your full base attack just to be a little bit faster. Now, another thing that people might wonder is, what about the times where the monsters are gonna hit you, right? As if you want to prevent yourself from getting hit, prevent taking damage, parry, dodge, when should you use it? For Changli specifically, when you dodge at the 3rd basic attack, you can still cut back in to the 4th basic, which enters in the true side and then give you the enflamement stack. But if you were to dodge in your first 2 hits, then that's where you are gonna need to restart all over again. Unless you enter into a perfect dodge, counters will instantly get you back into the 3rd and 4th basic attack, which will allow you to gain enflamement. So for casual players who cannot nail this perfect dodge or the dodge counter, then it is going to be quite bad. But if you can land this, then the overall rotation for Changli can be pretty quick, even if you need to dodge the enemies, right? So that is something to keep in mind as well. Now, moving on to the leveling priorities, and I guess exactly how do we build Changli. First of all, the priority for Changli's talents, most important is going to be Resonance skill, followed by Resonance Forte Circuit, and then your Resonance Liberation, right? For your intro skill as well as its basic attack, if you want to save resources, you can completely choose to ignore them, because like I mentioned, Changli's basic attack damage is honestly very, very low as compared to her Resonance skill as well as her Resonance Liberation, right? So these 3 are the most important. And then afterwards, you want to get all of the major tracers, followed by the crit rate, as well as the attack percentage, as well as the minor tracers here and there, right? So that's going to be that for the tracers. Alright, so with her character kit explained, I just want to quickly go through this one final thing, which is from the CN's opinion, and I think you guys would have probably seen this from my upcoming video as well, which is Changli a main DPS or a sub DPS, or is she a brand new kind of archetype that is looking to be cooked, right? Looking to be cooked. So the current overall consensus from the CN theory crafter and the CN guide makers is that Changli belongs in a interesting class, somewhat similar to Calchero, and not exactly like Yingling, like a sub DPS, like a full-on sub DPS with coordinated attack, and also not really a full-on main DPS such as your Ji Yan, such as your Jingxi, because of the downtime when you do not have her skill, right? Because even though you can gain your stacks of enflammement through your basic attack chain, it is still considered a lot slower, and Changli's basic attack multiplier is just really, really bad. So it is a effective DPS loss if you want to make Changli a main DPS, as compared to if you were to somehow able to weave in a second DPS to kind of rotate between these two characters. Currently, the current two most ideal teammates for Changli as a second slot of DPS is either going to be Encore or as well as Shixia, because both of them can benefit from the fusion damage buff and the resistance liberation damage, especially for Shixia, right? And both of them also have some kind of hit drag, especially for Encore. So these two are going to be somewhat of the best in slot teammate for Changli. But that being said, Tian do believe that in the future, Changli is gonna have a potential better teammate which will truly shine this unique playstyle, which they categorize as a second DPS. Not a main, not a sub, but rather a second DPS. Similar to like your follow-up team comp, like a duo DPS in Honkai Starbucks, where both follow-up units, they are dealing somewhat similar levels of damage, and that is gonna be the case for Changli as well. Currently, both Encore and Shixia, even though they kind of cover some of Changli's downtime, but they believe that in the future, if a unit can have even more of a benefits, such as, for example, if they have some sort of coordinated attack off field, or some sort of buff that can affect their entire team, or some kind of debuffs or buffs can also apply to our entire team, it is going to make the overall team feel a lot more smoother. So that is going to be the overall concept. So Changli is not meant to be a main DPS, and players thinking of playing Changli as a main DPS, you will notice that her overall damage output is going to be a little bit less impactful compared to our traditional main DPS, such as Ji Yan, such as Jingxi, right? So that is going to be the overall verdict. And then for weapons, you can kind of see this replacement over here. Her signature weapon is going to be a base out of 100%. If you do have the Emerald of Genesis, which is going to be the standard weapon, it comes at a roughly 14.5% decrease in terms of overall performance. But this is going to be in a vacuum tier crafter situation, right? And then the next best is going to be the Commando of Conviction, which is a very, very nice attack buff that does last for quite a while. And finally, Luna Cutter at these, right? But do know that between both of these weapons, there's not too much of a difference, but it is a almost 30% drop off compared to her signature weapon. So for players who do not have the standard weapon using a 4-star, do expect a little bit of a performance dip when you are going to be using Changli. Alright, then jumping into the Echo set recommendations, because unfortunately Changli cannot run the 4-4-1-1-1 set, since the Inferno set, right, the Fusion set does not have two different 4 costs. That's only for like our units such as our Bird as well as our Thundering set, right? So we are going to be running 4-3-3-1-1 during the 5-piece Fusion set, aiming for the classic DPS setup. Nothing too crazy over here. Crit rate, crit damage on your main stat. If you are going to be getting her signature weapon, it is a crit damage main stat, so you might want to get a little bit more of the crit rate for your Inferno Rider main cost, right? Alright, so between the 3 costs where you want to run double fusion damage or fusion plus attack percentage, the difference is very, very small. It's slightly less than a 1% difference. So honestly, whichever one has a better substats, just run those with the better substats. So it's very, very straightforward, right? And then lastly, your 1 cost is definitely going to be your attack percentage, and your substats is going to be very, very normal. Attack percentage, crit rate, crit damage, resistance, skill, resistance, liberation, all that kind of stuff. In terms of priority for substats, you do want to focus on your double crit, followed by your resistance, skill damage, which is roughly around the same as your attack percentage, and then followed by everything else, right? So a rough benchmark for your Changli, which is going to be roughly 60 to 80% crit rate and 220 to 240% crit damage for something to aim at, right? And then another alternative is that if players do not want to run a fusion set, you want to run Changli as more of a like supporting unit for your other DPS, such as Encore, you can consider running the 5-piece moonset, as you guys can see over here, using the exact same main set as well as the exact same substats, right? The reason being, team-wide damage buff using this moonset could become really good, especially since the attack buffs from the bird itself, the Heron, as well as the 5-piece is quite considerable. So if you're on call as an incredibly high DPS or Chita as an high DPS, or in the future if we get another unit that does very high damage by itself during Changli's downtime, you could consider running the 5-piece moonset. And this 5-piece moonset, it can be pretty versatile. You can share this with your Mortefi, you can share it with your Sanghua, so it is a pretty universal set if you want to cook about that as well, right? So that is going to be our overall echoes. Alright, then jumping into her resonance chains or her dupes. So between her sequence 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, sequence 1 offers very little increase at only 2.6% based on the CN calculations, because most of it is going to be from the anti-interrupt. Just a little bit of a quality of life, especially when you're hitting the last attack to give you the inflammation stacks. You do not get interrupted from a boss's attack, because if that happens and you didn't dodge, you're going to have to start all over again, which is a very big DPS loss. So it is really a comfort eidolon that are meant for players that have issues dodging with Changli. For her sequence 2 is going to be a pretty decent 17.6% on paper damage, which is a 25% crit of 50 crit value lasting for 8 seconds. And this pretty much lasts the entirety of the battle, so you can afford to let go of your crit a little bit and go more into crit damage, right? Or just overall make building Changli a little bit easier. So sequence 2 is pretty good. Sequence 3 increase your ultimate damage by 80%, increase, and then overall 8.3% final increase, because at the end of the day, ultimate damage increase is not going to be super game changing, especially when you consider there is an inherent cooldown and the energy cost is going to be there to prevent Changli from spamming this ultimate all the time, right? So even though it's an 80% increase, final damage is going to be roughly 8.3%. For your sequence 4, team-wide 20% attack buff lasting 30 seconds, roughly 7.2% increase. This sequence as of now doesn't really have a very impactful use, but if in the future we get even stronger DPS units that you can pair up with Changli, then expect this 20% attack to last a lot longer and have a lot more impact, right? So that's going to be that. And then sequence 5 and sequence 6 is where Changli has an extremely high damage increase, as you will be seeing from my $1 versus $2,000 Changli. Sequence 5 is going to be an overall 21.3% final damage increase, as because it is a multiplier increase. And like I mentioned a lot of time, for all gacha games, multiplier increases are always one of, if not the best increase that you can give to a DPS unit, right? So very nice. And finally, sequence 6, a roughly 23.7% increase because of the absolutely massive 40% defense reduction. Yeah, so defense reduction, nothing much to be said. 40%, absolutely insane. 23.7% final damage increase. So if players are thinking about pulling for Changli's sequences, you do want to try to get your sequence 2 if you want. Otherwise, there isn't a lot of point going for the sequence 1. And between sequence 1 and the signature weapon, it is a lot more recommended to get the signature weapon first before sequence 1, because number 1, it is technically cheaper, it's 100% win rate. Number 2, the damage increase from the weapon is a lot higher, right? As you can see from the previous stat just now, it is a roughly 14.5% increase over a standard weapon. So yep, that's gonna be that S1 over sequence 1, right? Now, finally going into Changli's team comps, which is going to be the last section. Changli by herself, she wants to rely on a team comp that can cover her downtime. Because Changli's downtime, when you do not have her skill, when you do not have an ultimate, when you only need to rely on a basic attack, it is very low damage, right? Her damage multiplier on basic attack, not only is it low, it is also very slow. So units that can come into a player's mind, which is definitely going to be units like Encore, Chixia, Have a Rover even, because Have a Rover does have a very high burst damage. So very good. As long as there is a DPS unit that allows you to use the quick swap tech, where if a unit were to pass their attack animation and you can swap into Changli during this time while they're still continuing their attack animation, best example being Encore's press and hold heavy, that is going to be an ideal teammate for Changli, right? So units like Encore, is going to be really good. The overall rotations between this team, definitely Verena, she is her, right? She is the GOAT. She's going to be there for everyone. All type res band, all type res down, increased team-wide healing. It's very good. Generates conservative energy. So just an overall very good buff for your entire team. And The overall rotation is somewhat gonna be like casting your Marina's buffs and then jumping into Changli first, because Changli's outro skill can buff your incoming DPS next. So you want to go into Changli first before you jump into the next DPS unit. So once Changli is there casting her forces of enflammement, then you can change to the next DPS unit, swoop in, cover the downtime, then swoop back into Changli. And if Changli has the intro skill or outro skill, then you can swap back into the second DPS, and this rotation will kind of repeat itself, slotting Verina's Consoler energy whenever the opportunity to provide the all-type damage bonus, right? So that's gonna be that. So you can see over here, the overall rotations from Changli is gonna be seen from this chart with or without Verina, right? So you can see her E skill is gonna be 22,000, True Sight order is gonna be 17,000, 10,000. Ultimate is going to be roughly 61,000, and then this is going to be the 4 deaths of enflammement at 42k as well as 47k with or without ultimate. So the overall rotation of Changli is going to be coming up to on average 68,408. If you do have Verina's buff, it's going to be an average rotation of 96,651. Should you be using Taoqi with Changli? Technically speaking, you know, Taoqi, she does have the Resident skill damage buff, and she does have a pretty long hit track herself, and she does have parry. But overall reason why you wouldn't want to use Taoqi is because her damage output as a unit is just simply way too slow, right? She's simply way too slow. So compared to another unit that can deal damage faster at a faster pace, and you can be a lot more reactive to the enemy bosses, it is technically not optimal if you want to run 2 giant BOOBAs in the same team. But obviously, if you want to just play this game for fun, then definitely Taoqi is gonna be a viable choice for Changli. One last thing to kind of wrap up this overall video, and basically where CN is gonna be comparing Changli with some of the other units, right? So they kind of see her as a unit that requires more intricate piloting, that you can't just brainlessly spam her stuff, because if you were to ruin Changli's rotations, you're gonna be getting her enflammement stacks a lot slower, and if that is the case, it will drastically impact her damage output. Changli as a unit, CM believes that it is not something that can press a skill and let go, because she does not have off-field damage such as Yingling or Yuanwu. So for units that if you want to use Changli, for example, with like Jingxi with the coordinate off-field damage, she's not gonna be as smooth as a fit with Jingxi because she does not have the off-field damage. She is, you can kind of see her as like a stronger version of Mortefi in terms of damage output from herself, but because Mortefi has this coordinated attack, it will allow Jingxi to stack on her stacks a lot faster. So if you were to use Changli with Jingxi, even though she does way more damage than Mortefi, it may or may not negatively impact your Jingxi's damage, because now her stacks are coming at a slower pace, right? So something to keep in mind if you are thinking of using Changli with Jingxi. And another comparison, lastly, is going to be the overall rotations with Changli compared to your other traditional team comps, such as with Jiyan, your Yingling, your Jingxi so far. As a limited unit, it is very heavily dependent on your swap cancel, your swap tech, or your swap back, or whatever, right? You really want to use different units to cover Changli's downtime in order to absolutely bring this damage up to the highest potential. If you do not do this, the overall damage, if you want to compare with units like Jingxi, Jiyan, or Yingling, it is gonna be seemingly much lower because you did not make use of Changli's very long hit drags, which is basically actively encouraging the player to do swap backs with the secondary unit, right? So it is highly advisable that the players do try out Changli herself, get used to her, get used to playing her with a team, and then cast your own decisions whether she is going to be a good or not unit, right? So yeah, with that, we have pretty much come to the end of Changli's CN unit analysis. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Are you going to be putting for her? Do you want to join the Discord.gg for Spooky Video? We have very active community talking about Honkai Star and Wuthering Waves on the issues. Stream is Twitch.tv for Bulky. You do the Bulky. I'm sure today. All the best for Changli pools, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.